This is The Zero Hour with RJ Eskow, produced by the WeAct Radio Network in Washington, D.C., and broadcast across the nation. Visit us online at thisisthezerohour.com or at youtube.com/thezerohour. Ladies and gentlemen, RJ Eskow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Zero Hour. We have a terrific show for you this week, including in this first hour, we're going to have an extended interview on the situation in Ukraine with Christina Vanden Heuvel, publisher and editor of The Nation and columnist for The Washington Post. So we have a great hour coming up for you, but before we do, and in the second half hour, we have something else great. I don't remember what it is. You know, that's the thing about The Zero Hour. We're not formal about how we approach this stuff. So, but before we get that, I was trying to think about how to start the show today because so much has been going on. We have a lot of misleading information coming out from Tim Geithner, who has a book coming up, and I'll address that in an upcoming monologue this hour. We have Bill Clinton's remarks at the dreary and dreadful fiscal summit that gets put on every year to convince us that our biggest problem is that we're spending too much money at the government level fixing our problems. And that's, of course, why things are so great right now economically. So I thought about that, and then I thought, well, here's what popped into my head, and we'll just go with it, which is I was thinking about the fact that Netroots Nation, the annual convocation of online activists and bloggers and lefties of various sorts, is coming up. It will be this June in Detroit, and for some reason, while I was thinking, I have to make my reservations, I have to buy my tickets, all that, I've given presentations once or twice at these things, but this year, we're going to bring the show to Netroots Nation. We'll interview a lot of great people. We'll be on Radio Row and all that. And for some reason, an old song came into my head. So I'm going to sing you a song because it just blew me away when I thought about the implications of it. There was a song when I was a kid that was a country western song. And some of you may know I was a working musician for a while. I was a country western singer. And as a teenager, sang at a dude ranch in the Catskills. Back even before then, in the 60s, there was this song that was such a big hit, it even made it on the rock and roll radio. And it went, last night I went to sleep in Detroit City, and I dreamed about the cotton fields back home. I dreamed about my mother, dear old daddy's sister and brother. I dreamed about the girl I left waiting all alone, something like that. I want to go home. And anyway, so this song came into my mind because and when it did, I realized that song was about a middle class that was so prosperous, so successful, that working people could travel, in this case, from the Deep South to Detroit, get a job that was so good that the emptiness of the human experience suddenly became real and concrete for them. I think the second verse, what was the second verse? The second verse is something about, by day I make the cars, and by night I make the bars. If only they could read between the lines. In other words, it's like, all I do is make money and then have a good time. That was, to a certain extent, the middle class conundrum of the 1960s. The middle class was becoming so prosperous that they were looking for deeper meaning in life, which is what human beings should be able to do. We should be able to be financially secure so we can look for deeper satisfaction. That's who we are as a people. That's where we ought to be going. And so he's saying, they think I'm doing great in Detroit City, but they don't realize I'm lonely for my home, because he says, and then the last verse is spoken, he says, I rode a freight train north to Detroit City. That's how poor he was, right? When he left, he couldn't even afford the bus fare. And after all these years, I realize I'm just wasting my time. So I'm going to take my foolish pride, stick it on a southbound train and ride. I'm going back to the loved ones I left behind. I want to go home. So anyway, here we think about that for a second. Detroit and the American manufacturing sector was so prosperous, we were able to achieve that as a country, that people were looking for deeper meaning, even if that meant going home, rejecting it. The student movement, the counterculture movement of the 60s was about searching for deeper meaning in a generation that grew up in prosperity and assumed there would also be prosperity. How do we rebuild that prosperity? How do we recreate what we had before. I was living in Michigan in the 80s during the time when things were collapsing, and a lot of those Southerners who moved north to get industrial jobs were going down to Texas, where there was an oil boom, where there were oil jobs. I'm talking about maybe 84, around that time, 84, 85, maybe even slightly earlier. No, I'd say 86, actually. And now those jobs are gone too. So we've had this kind of nomadic working class that has been driven out of existence. We have a city that's now racially segregated. The other striking thing about that song is that a white Southerner was living in Detroit, which now has been almost completely segregated as the wealthier, more prosperous white people move to the suburbs. And Detroit's deprived of their tax base and their income and so on. How do we recreate the American base? How do we recreate the American working class? How do we recreate the American dream? We'll have to figure that out somewhere, somehow, and start singing it, and give people a chance to sing the right kind of blues, which is the blues, the country blues, the soul blues that comes from searching for deeper meaning, not just struggling to stay alive. That's what we're about here. I'm Richard Eskow, RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero.